George Hawkins is my guest. He's the general manager for Warsaw. Good morning, welcome, Happy New Year.
Good morning, Clay. How are you?
I am doing well, if I can hear you. All right, let's talk. Yesterday in the Washington Post, the headline read, "Billions Needed to Upgrade America's Leaky Water Infrastructure." And I read that in Adams Morgan, where we are, there is a particular problem that I wasn't aware of. Should I worry about sinkholes in Adams Morgan?
I don't think you need to worry about sinkholes in Adams Morgan, although that's always a possibility. The one that we discovered at the corner of Kalorama and Champlain was a surprise to us as much as it was to anyone else. There was, as the article reported, I went to the scene that evening when we heard the story of the front tire of a truck as it was taking a right turn, breaking through the surface of the street. We mobilized, shot off the street, and looked into the hole, and I was there with a flashlight looking in the hole. Turns out the sewer that was underneath the street, and this was an egg-shaped brick sewer put in the 1890s, essentially over a fairly long period of time had washed away. The flow in many of these sewers that also take stormwater, so in a big rainstorm and all that water's flushing into the storm drain, obviously the flow that goes into the drain goes way up and it becomes very fast and hard and then drops again. But that constant pressure change wore away the interior brick, and it literally washed it down the sewer. So when you looked into the hole, what had been happening is that flow, particularly during these rain events where it becomes so high, had worn away the surface underneath the street and left a sinkhole. Fortunately, we caught it and were able to fix it for about $1 million. So it was not a small fix. That is an unusual occurrence. I've been here as either a trustee or running DC Water for about 5 years, and that's the first occasion we've had during my era of that incident. So it's not frequent, but it is sort of emblematic of the challenges that come from having such an old system in the city and the repairs and capital improvements that we need to get it up to date.
We're going to talk a bit about costs when we finish this question. Let me talk a little about your career. You began that by practicing law for the Boston firm Ropes and Gray and is a member of the bar in Massachusetts and the District of Columbia. You graduated summa cum laude from Princeton University in 1983 and cum laude from Harvard Law School in 1987. Since then, you have taught environmental law and policy for the Princeton Environmental Institute at Princeton University. With a stellar background like that, what brought you to sewer and water?
That's a great question, and I absolutely love the job that I have now, although I've had many in the water field. I started, as you mentioned, at a private law firm. From there I went and was a U.S. Environmental Protection Agency enforcement lawyer and actually used to do water law cases. From there, I worked in the watershed world in New Jersey, protecting water bodies by looking at the entire drainage basin for a river and working with citizens groups, including with wastewater authorities. And from there, I came to Washington, D.C. to run the Department of Environment for Mayor Fenty. What I became convinced, tomorrow morning at our board meeting, we will be reviewing, and I hope the board will be approving tentatively, a budget for 2013. And that budget will have disbursements for operating and capital over $1 billion. That organizations like these authorities is where the actual work is done to protect the water quality, both that we drink on one end, and then after we use it for whatever purpose, whether it be in a toilet or in a car wash or a restaurant, that water goes down the drain and has to be treated and handled before it's returned to the environment. And that's the core work of maintaining this critical resource. And I felt I should join and become part of the effort to do this work. And I've found that it has been an absolutely fascinating job. It combines doing what I consider a fundamental obligation of society, which is to provide clean water to the people who live in our communities, and cleaning it once it's used. On the other hand, it's a service that most people don't know much about. So while we know what roads are and bridges are, and we sort of understand where power comes from and power plants, most people really have no idea where the water comes from when they turn on the faucet and what it takes to get it there. Or when it goes down the drain, where does it go?
In D.C., the average water pipe is about 77 years old, according to this report, and many of them, as you said earlier, were laid in the 19th century. Sewers are even older. And we're talking about what kind of budget in general, and are we also discussing rate hikes?
Yes, and we have sort of a. This is not just in Washington D.C. This is across the country. Most of the cities in the country were being built at around the same time, and a lot of them were having water and sewer systems put in place at about the same time. And so you have a very large capital investment, originally putting in all these pipes 50, 60, 70, 100 years ago. And then there's a period where most of the expenditures that most of the jurisdictions were making were just operating and maintenance, that when you first put in the pipe, you don't really need to replace it right away. And unfortunately, the pricing mechanism that most of our enterprises have put in place were enough to keep the system operating, but not to replace the capital assets. Now something has worn out, and just fixing it isn't good enough. You've actually got to replace it. That is a bill that has come due, not just in Washington, D.C., but in cities across the country. And that's a much larger expense than just keeping the system operating. So that's one very significant expenditure that has come due. As you point out in the article highlights, we have water mains in the city. The average age of a water main is 7 decades, almost 8 decades now. That's amazing. Sewers are older than that. We do have lines that were put in, some even before the Civil War. Those are old systems that need to be replaced. That bill has come due. In parallel to that cost, we are regularly improving the environmental quality of the work that we do as required by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and regulations. And in fact, the largest expenditures that we have at D.C. Water are to meet federal mandates to clean water before it goes back to the Potomac and to the Chesapeake Bay. So we're talking about expenditures in the billion-dollar range. Our 10-year capital program, so this is just capital expenditures, is $3.8 billion. And we run about a $450 million annual operating budget, which is different than capital. So there's operating funds and there's capital funds. Those are huge expenditures. Our customers are not used to it. One of the reasons that we're communicating as frequently, or at least trying to communicate with our customers as often as we do, because we believe the more that people know about what we're doing and why we're doing it, we're hopeful that we'll support it. Folks are used to relatively low water and sewer rates. The average single family in Washington, D.C. pays about $60 to $65 for on a monthly bill. And that's gone up significantly in the last 4 years. It was about $40 3 or 4 years ago, and now it's about $60. That's a big change. On the other hand, I compare that to what I pay for my cable bill or my phone bill or my cell phone bill or power bill. It has been an underpriced commodity given the scale of what it takes to deliver. And that's the simple reality that we face today. It's not that we want to raise rates. We'd rather keep them low, and we're keeping them as low as we can. But these huge projects cost money, and they need to be done. Adams Morgan is a perfect example. The water mains that we've been replacing, as you've seen, it's been a big project on a lot of the areas in Adams Morgan. Those water mains averaged about 100 years old. And when you repair them, it's expensive, obviously, when you have to dig the hole and put in a patch. But what we've been doing at Adams Morgan is actually digging up the street and putting in an entire new main system and then tying in all of the water service lines. That's a project that we then hope has a useful life of another 60 or 70 years into the future. But when you do that project, it's a big capital cost in a particular single year. And that's the kind of project and the kind of cost that we faced all over the district.
Mr. Hawkins, we have to have those cell phones and we have to have the cable. The water we don't see a lot of until we have a problem getting it. So you understand why people don't really think about the importance of a vital, healthy system.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I tend to believe that perhaps the most significant advance in public health in modern civilization was the provision of clean water on one end and the treatment of wastewater on the other end. Without that, literally, human society could not function. And in places where this clean water is not available, more children die of waterborne illnesses than the wars of the world combined. I mean, it's an absolutely fundamental attribute of human society, yet it's hidden from most people's eyes. And that's why we are delighted that you have me on your station this morning. We're not pleased to have the problem we had in Adams Morgan with that sinkhole or water mains that are breaking. That's the reality of a system that's old, that we're doing our best and hoping our customers will support us to improve. So we're determined. We are at the helm. We are making the decisions we think we need to make. But we absolutely need an informed public to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. So we hope that they will understand and support us in the much work that we have in the days ahead.
George Hawkins, General Manager of the District of Columbia Water and Sewer Authority. Thank you so much for being my guest.
I'm delighted to be here. People can visit us at dcwater.com, and we also have a Facebook page and active Twitter account, so we try to communicate in all the ways we can.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Have a great day. Bye.